It was a lost village in the heart of the African savanna, where the houses of red clay rose like silent witnesses of generations who learned to find beauty in simplicity. The sun was born every day by painting the golden sky, while the lonely acacias swing gently in the wind that brought stories of distant lands. In this scenario of authentic Africa and forgotten by the modern world, a teacher named Amara woke up before dawn with a certainty that challenged all logic. Education was the only bridge capable of connecting those children to a different future. She walked barefoot through the red earthways, carrying not only books worn out of time, but the unshakable conviction that each child was a universe of possibilities waiting to be discovered. What she did not imagine is that she would soon know a boy who would test all the limits of his compassion and determination. The school where Amara taught was a small building of clay bricks, with a roof of straw that let out gilded light rays in the mornings. The wallets were made of rustic wood, some broken, some patched with love and creativity by the children's own parents. There was no electricity. There were no computers. There were not even enough books for all students. But there was something much more powerful. There was hope throbbing with every word he had pronounced, with every lesson she drew on the makeshift black picture. His hands calling for work in the small garden he kept to complement his insignificant salary held the chalk as if it were a magic wand capable of turning dreams into reality. Each morning it was a new silent miracle, where barefoot children came running, eager to learn about a world that seemed infinitely greater than their own limitations. The village lived from the cultivation of corn and the creation of some lean goats that grazed in the dry savanna. Women carried water in mud jars per miles, while men worked under the scorching sun trying to rip their livelihood to their families. It was a community where everyone knew each other, where pain and joys were shared as if they were from a large extended family. Amara had been born there, grown there, and chosen to stay right after he studied in the big city, because he knew his mission was exactly in that apparently forgotten place by progress. She saw potential where others saw only poverty, seeing bright intelligence where others saw only dirty and barefoot children. Her heart beat the rhythm of the ancestral drums that echoed on full moon nights, deeply connecting her to the roots of an Africa that carried ancient wisdom in every grain of sand. During the afternoons, when heat became unbearable and classes needed to stop, Amara used to sit under the great baobab in the center of the village. It was there that she planned her lessons, corrected the few notebooks that could provide for students, and dreamed of a future where those children could fly beyond the limitations that fate seemed to have imposed. She knew that many of them would never have the opportunity to study beyond those early years. Girls would be promised to marry very early, boys would have to work to help support families. But that did not decrease their determination to plant knowledge seeds that could germinate at any time in their lives. Each child who passed through his hands carried a little bit of his dreams, a spark of hope that could turn into flame when expected. What Amara did not know is that the universe was preparing a supreme test for its faith in humanity and the transforming power of unconditional love. Soon, a small figure would appear in his life, bringing with him a story of pain so deep that he would challenge all his concepts about justice, destiny, and purpose. It was as if the invisible forces governing the world whispering, "You talk so much about planting seeds of hope, but do you have the courage to plant a seed when the earth looks completely sterile?" The answer would come on a torrential rain afternoon, when the fate of his school door in the form of an orphan boy who would forever change the life course, and without anyone might imagine, the course of world history. It was one afternoon when the loaded clouds poured upon the savanna of violent, unexpected rain that Amara noted a small, shrunk figure under the makeshift's marquee. The boy, who should not be more than 8 years old, was shattered to his bones, shaking not only cold, but something much deeper she immediately recognized. It was the tremor of the soul of those who lost everything and no longer know to believe. His eyes were too big for his thin face and carried an ancient sadness that seemed to challenge his young age. The torn, dirty clothes told a story of abandonment that Amma had knew too well. But there was something different on that boy. An almost faded light, but still flashing, like a candle fighting the wind so as not to completely extinguish. His name was Kwame, and his story was one of the many silent tragedies that happened in that region of Africa with a devastating frequency. He had lost his parents in an epidemic that swept several neighboring villages, leaving behind hundreds of orphans who spread through the savannah like seeds in the wind, trying to find fertile soil where they could root again. Kwame had walked for days, sleeping in the open, eating wild fruits when he could find, drinking water from muddy puddles, until his bare and wounded feet brought him to that school. He could not read or write, had never attended a classroom, but something in his instinct had guided him there, as if he knew that schools were places where miracles could happen, where kind people sometimes appeared to save lost children. Amara approached slowly, careful who knows that wounded children can escape the slightest sudden movement. She had seen many orphans over the years. War, hunger, diseases created new orphans every day in that region. But something in Kwame's gaze touched a deep rope in her heart. It was as if the universe were whispering in his ears. This is the moment that will define who you really are. Without hesitation, she knelt in the mud next to the boy and asked the simplest and most revolutionary question of his life. "Are you hungry?" The answer came not only in words, but in tears that carried years of silent pain, in a nod so desperate that it seemed like a silent scream asking for help. At that moment, something broke into the heart of Amara. She saw in Kwame not just another needy orphan, but a reflection of all the injustices she had witnessed throughout her life, all children who could have been saved if someone had extended their hand at the right time. She thought of her own childhood when her mother died early, and she was almost forced to leave her studies to take care of the minor brothers. He remembered the teacher who had changed her life by insisting that she continued studying, paying her own school materials by believing in her potential when she even believed she herself. It was as if the life cycle was completing, offering him the opportunity to be to Kwame what someone had been for her decades ago. Without thinking twice, Amara took Kwame by the hand and took him into the school. She had a small pot with corn porridge that she had prepared for her own lunch. A simple but nutritious meal, seasoned with the love of those who know how to turn a lot. While Kwame devoured the food with a hunger that went far beyond the physical, Amara watched every movement of it, every expression of relief that passed through her thin face. It was like watching a slow-motion miracle, the transformation of a lost boy in a child who had hope again. At that moment, without any of the two, it was being planted the seed of one of the most extraordinary transformation stories the world has ever seen. From that rainy day, something changed in the routine of Amara in a way that she herself could not explain completely. Every day, even before preparing her own meal, she cooked an extra portion of corn porridge, sometimes enriched with a peanut, handy when she could buy, sometimes just seasoned with salt, and the infinite love of those who understand that feeding a hungry child is a sacred act. It was not charity in the traditional sense of the word. It was much deeper and more transformative. It was the recognition that that boy didn't just need food to the body, but something that restored his faith in humanity. Kwame began to appear at school every day, always at the same time, always with the same look mixed with gratitude and shyness, as if he couldn't believe that someone cared enough to reserve food especially for him. Amara soon realized that Kwame's hunger for knowledge was even greater than her physical hunger. Even without officially enrolled in school, he sat at the bottom of the classroom and absorbed every word, every lesson, every gesture of affection like a dry sponge that finally finds water. Her eyes shone with almost supernatural intensity when Amara drew lyrics on the blackboard, when she told stories from the great African leaders, when she explained mathematical concepts using pebbles and twigs. It was as if all the intellectual potential that had been repressed by the tragedy and abandonment was finally finding room to flourish. Amara was fascinated by how quickly Kwame learned. In a few weeks, he already recognized all the letters of the alphabet. In a few months, was reading simple words with a fluency that surprised even her. What most impressed Amara was Kwame's insatiable thirst for learning about everything. He asked questions that revealed a curious and analytical mind. Why did the sun always be born on the same side? Why did some plants grow even in dry season? How did the birds know where they fly when they migrated? Her questions were so deep and insightful that she sometimes left Amara without response, forcing her to research and study to satisfy the voracious curiosity of that extraordinary boy. It was as if Kwame had been born with a superior intelligence, but it had been dormant until it found the right environment for awakening. Amara began to realize that she was not just teaching a child, she was discovering a genius in formation, a brute diamond that only needed cutting to reveal all her brightness. As the months passed, Kwame turned before everyone's eyes in the village. The thin, scared boy had appeared on a rainy afternoon was becoming a confident, articulated young man with a presence that drew attention wherever he went. He helped other students with the lessons, created educational games using materials found in the wild, and even began to help Amara in preparing classes. His ability to solve complex problems with creative solutions made everyone impressed. When the school ran out of chalk, it was Kwame who discovered how to make homemade chalk using white clay and water. When the wallets broke, it was he who designed a repair system using only strings and pieces of wood. It was as if your mind worked differently, always finding paths where others saw only obstacles. Amara began to realize that she was witnessing something very rare and special. Kwame was not just a brilliant student, he was a born visionary, someone who could see possibilities where others saw only limitations. During the makeshift science classes under Baobab, he made connections between concepts he had not even thought, proposed experiments using local resources, and showed an intuitive understanding of complex principles that would normally take years to assimilate. It was as if the universe had concentrated all the wasted potential of generations of brilliant African children in a single boy, and now this potential was finally finding room to manifest. Amara knew she was facing something extraordinary, but she couldn't imagine how far that seed of genius could grow. The years began to pass like pages of a book that no one imagined being writing an epic story. Kwame grew not only in stature, but in wisdom and maturity, developing a personality that combined the deep humility of those who knew the pain with the natural confidence of those who discovered their own talents. At 12, he already dominated not only the basic curriculum he had been able to offer, but had developed a voracious interest in themes that went far beyond what was taught in that small rural school. He borrowed books from the few visitors who occasionally came to the village, volunteer doctors, researchers, missionaries, and devoured each page with an intensity that impressed everyone. It was as if trying to compensate every year lost, absorbing knowledge at a speed that challenged any logical explanation. Amara began to realize that her limitations as a teacher were becoming evident in the face of Kwame's insatiable thirst for knowledge. She had taught her everything she knew about mathematics, science, history, and literature, but he kept asking for more, always more. It was then that she made a decision that would forever change his life course. He began writing letters to schools in the nearest city, explaining his students' extraordinary situation and asking him to continue his studies. The first answers were discouraging. Many schools simply ignored their letters. Others replied that they had no programs for underprivileged students. But Amara didn't give up, because she knew she was fighting not only for Kwame's future, but for the future of all the bright children who were born in forgotten places and never had a chance to show their potential. Amara's persistence was finally rewarded when a missionary school in the capital answered her letter with genuine interest. The director, a man named Father Michael, was intrigued by the description that Amma had made Kwame, and decided to pay a visit to the village to meet that extraordinary boy personally. Father Michael's trip to the village was a journey of discovery. He had never imagined that in the middle of the African savannah there could be a child with such thirst for knowledge and intellectual ability. When he finally met Kwame, he was impressed not only with his intelligence but with his emotional maturity and his ability to articulate complex ideas with surprising clarity. It was as if before a young wise disguised as a poor child. Father Michael decided to offer Kwame a full scholarship at his school, covering not only tuition but also housing, food, and school supplies. The news came to the village as a miracle that no one had dared to expect. Kwame, at the age of 13, would have the opportunity to study in one of the best schools in the country, with qualified teachers, equipped laboratories, and a library with thousands of books. It was the chance that Amara had dreamed of him, but at the same time his heart was leaving because he meant that he would have to leave the village, leave the only family he had known since he had become orphaned. The farewell would be painful, but they both knew it was necessary, like a bird mother who pushes the puppy out of the nest, knowing that only then will he learn to fly. In the night before Kwame's departure, Amara prepared a last special meal for them too. It was the same corn porridge she had offered him that first rainy afternoon, but now enriched with all the special ingredients she managed to gather: peanuts, wild honey, dried fruits. As they ate in silence in the light of the stars, they both knew that this was the end of one era and the beginning of another. Amara looked at Kwame and saw no longer the hungry orphaned boy who had found years ago, but a bright and determined young man, ready to conquer the world. She had planted a seed of love and knowledge, and now this seed was ready to be transplanted to a more fertile soil, where it could grow beyond any limitation. What neither imagined is that this temporary farewell was actually the beginning of a journey that would lead them to unimaginable heights. Kwame's adaptation to life in the big city was a process of simultaneous discoveries. He discovered a world of possibilities he had never imagined, while his new colleagues and teachers discovered the existence of a brilliant mind hidden under the simple appearance of a boy coming from the countryside. In the early days, Kwame felt like an out of waterfish, impressed with high buildings, cars, electricity, computers, technologies that were almost magical for him. But his adaptability was extraordinary, and in a few weeks he was not only following classes, but standing out in all subjects. His teachers were perplexed with the ease with which he absorbed complex concepts, as if his mind were a computer programmed to process at full speed information. What most impressed everyone around Kwame was his genuine humility and gratitude. Unlike many colleagues who came from wealthy families and considered that privileged education as a natural right, Kwame treated every class, every book, every opportunity to learn as a precious gift that could not be wasted. He studied until he was high hours, not because he was obliged, but because he felt a deep responsibility to honor the sacrifice he had made for him and the opportunity Father Michael had given him. It was as if it should be carried on your shoulders not just your own dreams, but the dreams of all the children in the village who would never have the same chance. This pressure, instead of crushing it, propelled him to be better and better. During the weekends and holidays, Kwame always returned to the village to visit Amara. These visits were moments of pure joy for both. He told about everything he was learning, showed the books he was reading, shared the scientific discoveries that fascinated him. Amara listened to each word with a heart full of pride, seeing in that brilliant young the materialization of all her dreams as an educator. She realized that Kwame was not just gaining technical knowledge, but developing a worldview that combined the intellectual sophistication of formal education with ancestral wisdom and the human values she had planted in her heart during the formative years. As Kwame advanced in his studies, he began to demonstrate a particular interest in technology and innovation. He spent hours at the school's computer lab, fascinated with the possibilities that computers offered. But his interest was not just technical. He began to visualize how technology could be used to solve the problems he knew so well: the lack of access to education in rural areas, the difficulty of communication between isolated communities, the need for innovative agriculture solutions in arid regions. It was as if his brilliant mind were constantly connecting the two worlds he knew: the world of infinite possibilities of modern technology and the world of real and urgent needs of his homeland. At 16, Kwame had already become a legend at school. His teachers described him as the brightest student they had ever found, and his grades were consistently perfect in all subjects. But what impressed most was his leadership ability and genuine concern for social issues. He organized study groups to help colleagues with difficulties, created extension projects to bring basic knowledge to needy communities around the city, and began developing their first ideas on how technology could be democratized to benefit marginalized populations. It was evident to everyone who were before someone intended for great things, someone who would not only be successfully successful, but would use his success to turn the world around him. Kwame's academic excellence caught the attention of renowned universities not only in Africa, but around the world. At 17, he received offerings from full scholarships from prestigious institutions in the United States, Europe, and Asia. The decision was not easy. Each university offered unique opportunities, and Kwame knew that his choice would determine not only his future, but also his ability to return to Africa everything he had received. After long conversations with Amara, who was still his most reliable counselor, He decided to accept a scholarship at MIT, one of the world's most respected universities in technology and innovation. The choice was strategic. He wanted to learn from the best, and then bring this knowledge back home. Kwame's arrival in the United States was another cultural shock, even more intense than its change from the village to the African capital. He was immersed in a world of unlimited resources, where state-of-the-art laboratories, gigantic libraries, and Nobel teachers were part of the daily routine. But instead of being intimidated, Kwame flourished in this environment of academic excellence. His thirst for knowledge, which had been fed by years of scarcity, was now finding an infinite intellectual banquet. He immediately stood out in his computer engineering classes, impressing veteran teachers with unique insights and innovative perspectives that only someone with his life experience could offer. What differentiated Kwame from his American and international colleagues was not only his exceptional intelligence, but his ability to see complex problems through a unique lens, the lens of someone who intimately knew both scarcity and abundance, both limitations and infinite possibilities. While other students developed projects for already saturated technology markets, Kwame focused on solutions to problems that most did not even know existing. How to bring internet to remote areas without infrastructure, how to create educational systems that worked in extreme poverty contexts, how to use artificial intelligence to optimize subsistence agriculture. His teachers quickly realized that they had not only a brilliant student in their hands, but a visionary with the potential to revolutionize technology on a global scale. During his second year in MIT, Kwame developed his first significant invention, a low-cost satellite communication system that could connect African rural communities to the global internet. The project drew attention not only from the academic community, but also from investors and technology companies that recognized their commercial and social potential. It was the first time Kwame realized that her ideas were not just academic exercises, but real solutions that could impact millions of lives. The feeling was simultaneously exciting and frightening. He was beginning to understand the power he had in his hands and the responsibility it represented. Every night before sleeping in her room on the MIT campus, Kwame looked at a picture she kept at the study table. An image of him and Amma sitting under her baobab in the village, both smiling as they shared a porridge plate. That image remembered him constantly from where he had come from, whom he had believed him, when he himself did not believe himself, and the silent commitment he had made to use any success he achieved to honor the woman who had saved her life. He knew that every concept he learned, every project he developed, every connection he made was bringing him closer to the moment he could significantly repay everything he had received. The orphan boy who had appeared in an African rural school was becoming a young man with the potential to change the world. And he never forgot that everything had begun with a simple plate of food offered with unconditional love. In the third year of MIT, Kwame had the idea that would change his life forever. During an artificial neural networks class, he began to visualize how this technology could be applied to solve one of Africa's biggest problems: lack of access to quality education in remote areas. His brilliant mind began to connect points that seemed impossible to connect. He imagined an artificial intelligence system that could function as a personalized teacher, adapting to the rhythm and specific needs of each student, working even on simple devices and limited connectivity. It was a revolutionary idea that combined cutting-edge technology with a profound understanding of educational realities in developing countries. Kwame spent months developing the first prototypes of his AI-based educational system, working 18 hours a day, driven by a passion that went far beyond academic ambition. He knew he was creating something that could turn the lives of millions of children like him. Bright children born into forgotten places that would never have the opportunity to show their potential. His teachers were impressed by the project's technical sophistication, but also with the social vision that motivated it. It was rare to find a student who combined technical excellence with humanitarian purpose so naturally and authentically. The first functional version of the system was secretly tested in the village itself, where Kwame had grown. During the summer holidays, he returned to Africa carrying donated laptops and an internet connection via experimental satellite. Amara, now with gray hair but with the same brightness in her eyes, she watched fascinated as Kwame installed her system in the same school where she had given her the first lesson. The children of the village, initially shy in the face of unknown technology, were soon enchanted by the electronic teacher, who spoke in his native language and adapted to the rhythm of learning of each. It was like watching a miracle in real time. Children who had never seen a computer were learning advanced math, foreign science, and languages with ease that surprised even Kwame. The pilot test results were extraordinary. In just 3 months, the village children showed academic progress that would usually take years to be achieved with traditional methods. Even more importantly, they showed enthusiasm for the learning that infected the whole community. Parents who had never attended school began to be interested in the education of their children. Young adults asked to use the system during the nights, and even the village elders came to observe classes with curiosity and admiration. Kwame realized that he had created more than an educational system, had created a tool for social transformation that could break generational cycles of poverty and lack of opportunities. The news about Kwame's innovative project spread quickly through the international academic community. Prestigious scientific journals published articles about their work. Technology conferences invited him to present his discoveries, and investors from around the world began to look for him by offering astronomical amounts to market his invention. But Kwame had a very clear view of what he wanted to do. He was not only interested in making money, but in creating a real and lasting impact on the lives of the neediest people. His strategy was revolutionary. Instead of selling his technology to the highest bid, he wanted to create a business model that would make quality education accessible even to the poorest communities in the world. At 22, Kwame made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of accepting the millionaire offers he received from large technological corporations, he decided to found his own company with a clear social mission. He called the company Baobab Technologies, in honor of the sacred tree under which so many afternoons had spent studying with Amara. His proposal was bold: create state-of-the-art educational technologies that could be offered for free or at symbolic prices for needy communities, funded by premium versions sold for developed markets. It was a business model that no one had tried before on this scale, combining technological innovation with social impact in a sustainable way. The early years of Baobab Technologies were a roller coaster of challenges and discoveries. Kwame set up his initial team with MIT colleagues who shared their view of using technology for social good, but also brought talents from Africa who deeply understood cultural and educational context where their products would be applied. Working with limited resources at first forced him to be creative and efficient in ways that large corporations with unlimited budgets have never needed to be. Each decision was thought not only in terms of profit, but impact. How many children would benefit? How many communities would have access to quality education? How many lives could be transformed? The company's first major achievement came when the government of an African country decided to implement the Kwame education system in a national scope. It was a contract that validated not only technology, but the social vision behind it. Seeing thousands of children using their systems to learn and grow gave Kwame a satisfaction that no academic prize or professional recognition could provide. It was the materialization of a dream that had begun in a small red clay school, under the loving care of a teacher who believed in the potential of an orphan boy when no one else believed. As Baobab Technologies grew, Kwame never lost sight of its roots and its original mission. He instituted a policy in the company where at least 50% of profits were reinvested in free educational projects for needy communities. In addition, he created a scholarship program that identified and supported young African talents, offering them the same educational opportunities he had received. It was as if he were infinitely multiplying the gesture of love he had done for him, creating a transformation network that spread like concentric waves through the African continent and beyond. The company's success caught the attention of international media, and Kwame began to be recognized as one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in the world. Magazines like Forbes and Time included him in his most influential people lists. Prestigious universities invited him to give lectures, and governments from various countries sought their advice on educational and technological policies. But behind all this recognition, Kwame maintained a deep humility and a constant connection with its origins. He knew that his success was not just the result of his individual talent, but a love chain and opportunities that had begun with a rural teacher who decided to feed a hungry boy. At 25, Kwame has reached a milestone that few entrepreneurs can reach. His company was valued at more than $1 billion, officially making him one of the world's youngest billionaires. The news was the cover of international newspapers, but for Kwame, the numbers were secondary. What really mattered were impact statistics. More than 5 million children in 40 countries were using their educational systems. Entire communities were coming out of poverty through education, and a new generation of young Africans was having access to opportunities their parents could never dream. It was the realization of a vision that had been born in a red clay school and grown through years of tireless dedication. Financial success brought with it an even greater responsibility. Kwame knew he had the power to influence global policies, to direct investments to important causes, to be a voice to the voice without voice. He began to use his platform to defend not only education, but also issues such as environmental sustainability, gender equality, and inclusive economic development. His lectures in international forums were expectation, not only by the technical content, but for the unique perspective he brought, the perspective of someone who had lived both extreme poverty and extreme abundance, and deeply understood the two worlds. Throughout this period of exponential growth, Kwame maintained a sacred tradition. Every 3 months he was returning to the village where everything had started to visit Amara. These visits were moments of spiritual and emotional renewal for him. Sitting under the same baobab where he had learned his first lessons, he shared with Amara not only his successes, but also his fears, doubts, and growing responsibilities. Amara, now internationally recognized as the teacher who had discovered and nourished a genius, heard with the same loving patience as usual, offering advice that combined ancestral wisdom with a deep understanding of the human heart. It was during one of these visits that Kwame made a decision that would surprise the business world. He announced that he would donate 90% of his fortune to educational and social development causes, maintaining only enough to ensure the sustainable growth of his company and a comfortable but not extravagant life. The decision was inspired by a conversation with Amara, who reminded her that true wealth is not measured in bank numbers, but in the ability to turn lives and leave a positive legacy for future generations. It was a gesture that echoed the unconditional generosity she had shown years ago when she shared her last meal with an orphaned boy. The news of Kwame's mass donation has had a global impact. Other billionaires began to follow their example, creating a philanthropic movement focused specifically in education and development. Universities have created research centers in their honor. Governments implemented policies based on their recommendations, and a new generation of social entrepreneurs emerged inspired by their business model. But for Kwame, the most important recognition came from an unexpected source: a handwritten letter by a 10-year-old child from a remote village in Mali, thanking you to make your dream of learning how to read. It was living proof that the transformation cycle started by Amara continued to expand, playing lives in places that he didn't even know existed. At 30, Kwame had become one of the most respected and influential figures in the world, but his greatest achievement was yet to come. He decided to create something no one had tried before: a virtual global university that would offer completely free world education to anyone with internet access, regardless of their geographical location or socioeconomic situation. The project, named Baobab University, would be fully funded by its fortune and operate with the highest academic standards, offering internationally recognized diplomas in critical areas such as technology, medicine, engineering, and education. It was a revolutionary initiative that could democratize access to higher education on a planetary scale. Baobab University's development required 5 years of meticulous planning and resource investment. Kwame brought together the best educators, technologists, and researchers in the world to create an educational platform that was simultaneously sophisticated and accessible. The university would offer not only theoretical courses, but also virtual laboratories, remote internships, personalized mentoring, and global networking. The artificial intelligence system developed by its team could adapt the content and teaching methodology to the specific needs of each student, considering not only their level of knowledge, but also their cultural context and technological limitations. The inauguration of Baobab University was a global event broadcast to over 1 billion people. Kwame chose to make the opening speech not of a luxurious auditorium in New York or London, but from the same rural school where Amara had given him his first lesson. Sitting in the same wooden chair where he had learned to read, with Amara by his side, he told the world about the transforming power of education and the responsibility we all have to ensure that no talent is wasted for lack of opportunities. It was a deeply symbolic moment that connected the humble past with the revolutionary future, showing that the greatest transformations often begin in the most unlikely places. In the first 6 months of operation, Baobab University received more than 10 million students from all continents. The stories that arrived were touching. Refugees in displaced fields studying medicine to help their communities, young single mothers forming in engineering as they took care of their children, elderly people realizing academic dreams that had been postponed for decades due to life circumstances. Each story confirmed Kwame's view that human talent is distributed equally around the world, but not opportunities, and that technology could be the great equalizer of this historical injustice. The impact of Baobab University went beyond any expectation. Entrant countries began to see significant improvements in their human development indicators as more citizens had access to quality higher education. New innovation centers have emerged in previously considered peripheral regions. Revolutionary startups were founded by university graduates, and a new knowledge-based economy began to emerge in places where there was once only subsistence agriculture. It was Kwame's dream materialization, to use education as a tool for social transformation on a global scale, proving that investing in people always generates the biggest possible returns. As the years passed, Kwame's influence transcended the world of business and technology, establishing it as a moral and intellectual leader of global reach. At 35, he had been invited to integrate advisory councils from international organizations such as UN, the World Bank, and UNESCO, always advocating for policies that prioritized sustainable education and human development. His voice was respected by world leaders, but he never lost the ability to connect with ordinary people, especially children and young people who saw a living example in it, that it is possible to overcome any adversity through education and determination. During this period, Kwame also dedicated himself to documenting and preserving his journey, not for vanity, but because he understood the power of stories to inspire transformations. He wrote an autobiography that became a worldwide bestseller, but more important than commercial success was the emotional impact the book had on millions of readers. People of all ages and backgrounds found in his history not only inspiration, but also a practical script to overcome their own limitations and contribute positively to the world. The book was translated into more than 50 languages and distributed free of charge in needy communities around the globe. The relationship between Kwame and Amara was still the emotional foundation of her entire journey. Now over 70, Amara had become an internationally respected figure, receiving honors from prestigious universities and being recognized as one of the most influential educators of the century. But for her, no recognition was more valuable than seeing the continuous impact of her former student on the world. They kept weekly conversations for video chamada, where Kwame sought his advice on important decisions and she was still her moral compass, always reminding him that true success is measured by the ability to raise others. It was during one of these conversations that Amara shared with Kwame a reflection that would mark him deeply. She said she had spent a lifetime wondering if she had made a real difference in the world, if her decades of schools in a rural school had really imported. But seeing the global impact Kwame was having, she finally understood that each teacher, every gesture of kindness, each planted knowledge seed, has the potential to grow beyond any expectation. It was as if she had discovered that she had been part of a much greater cosmic plan than her individual understanding, and that her life had had an extraordinary purpose that was only now being fully revealed. This conversation inspired Kwame to create its most ambitious initiative so far, the SEED Project, a global program that would identify and support exceptional educators in needy communities around the world. The project would provide resources, training, and technology for teachers who showed the same kind of dedication and vision that Amma had shown decades ago. The idea was to exponentially multiply the impact of extraordinary educators, creating a worldwide network of social transformers who could identify and nourish talents in places where no one else was looking. It was a way of honoring Amara while still alive, showing her that her legacy would extend far beyond her own life. The SEED project has become one of Kwame's most successful initiatives, identifying and supporting more than 10,000 exceptional educators in 100 different countries. Each selected educator received not only financial resources, but also access to advanced educational technologies, continuous training, and a global support network that allowed to share experiences and best practices. The impact was exponential. Each educator supported by the project was transforming hundreds of lives, creating a waterfall of positive changes that spread as concentric waves throughout entire communities. It was the materialization of Kwame's understanding that investing in exceptional educators was the most efficient way to transform the world. At the age of 40, Kwame had reached an almost mythical status as a symbol of overcoming and social transformation. Its history was told in schools around the world. His company had become one of the most valuable on the planet, and its philanthropic initiatives had directly benefited more than 100 million people. But what most proud was not impressive numbers or international recognition, was to know that he had created a replicable model of how to use individual success to generate collective transformation. Dozens of other billionaires had adopted similar approaches, creating a global movement of conscious capitalism that prioritized social impact along with financial return. During this period, Kwame also dedicated himself to forming the next generation of transforming leaders. He has created a highly selective mentoring program that identified young people with exceptional potential and similar overcoming stories, offering them not only world-class education, but also personal guidance and access to their global contact network. Many of these young people were already founding their own social companies and non-profit organizations, perpetuating the transformation cycle that had begun in a small African school. It was as if Kwame were planting seeds of a silent revolution that would continue to grow long after his own life. The special relationship between Kwame and Amara was still a constant source of strength and inspiration for both. Now, 75, Amara had moved to a comfortable house that Kwame had built for her in the village, but had all the modern amenities and a personal library with thousands of books. She was still teaching, now as a mentor of young teachers who came from all over the African continent to learn from her. His wisdom had become legendary, and his words were considered oracle by educators around the world. But for Kwame, she was just the woman who had saved her life with a porridge plate offered with unconditional love. It was during a special visit to the village on the 25 years of his first meeting, which Kwame and Amara had a conversation that would define the next chapters of their lives. Sitting under the centenary baobab, now surrounded by an exuberant garden that Kwame had ordered to cultivate, they reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. Amara expressed her gratitude for living enough to see the full impact of her decision to help an orphan boy, while Kwame reaffirmed that all she had achieved was a direct result of the seed of love and hope she had planted in her heart. It was a moment of mutual recognition that their lives were intertwined indissolubly, and that together, they had created something much larger than the sum of their individual parts. At the age of 45, Kwame made a decision that surprised the business world. He announced that he would gradually move away from his company's operational management to dedicate himself fully to education and writing. His justification was simple but deep. He wanted to use his ripe years to systematize and convey everything he had learned about leadership, innovation, and social transformation, ensuring that his knowledge would not die with him. It was a decision inspired by the awareness that his greatest contribution to humanity might not be his technological inventions, but his ability to form other social transformers. The transition has been carefully planned over 3 years. Kwame identified and trained a new generation of leaders within their organizations, all sharing their fundamental values of technical excellence combined with social purpose. He established governance structures that would ensure that their companies would continue to operate according to the same ethical and social principles that had guided them from the beginning, even without their daily presence. It was a practical demonstration of his philosophy that true leaders are not for what they personally conquer, but for the ability to create systems and form people who continue their work in a sustainable way. During this transition period, Kwame also intensified his work as a writer and speaker. He wrote a series of books on social entrepreneurship, ethical leadership, and the role of technology in solving global problems. His books became a mandatory reference in international management and development courses around the world. But what set them apart from other business works was the emotional depth and personal authenticity that permeated each page. Kwame did not write as a distant guru, but as someone who had lived both extreme poverty and extraordinary success, and viscerally understood the complexities of both experiences. His lectures also evolved from technical presentations on innovation to deep reflections on the meaning of life and success. Auditoriums around the world were thrilled when he told the story of his first date with Amara, when he described the moments of doubt and fear he had faced during his journey, when he explained how he had learned to balance personal ambition with social responsibility. It was as if he had become not only a successful entrepreneur, but a practical philosopher who could translate ancestral wisdom into contemporary language, connecting hearts and minds simultaneously. The relationship between Kwame and Amara, now 80, had evolved into something that transcended the traditional categories of student-teacher or even mother-child. They had become intellectual and spiritual collaborators, co-authors of a story that continued to write themselves. Amara, despite her advanced age, kept impressive lucidity and continued to offer deep insights on education, leadership, and human development. Their conversations were recorded and transcribed, not out of posterity, but because they contained a distilled wisdom that could benefit future generations of educators and leaders. It was as if they were creating a joint intellectual legacy that perfectly complemented the practical legacy of organizations and initiatives they had built. At 50, Kwame had settled as one of the most influential thinkers of his generation, but his greatest achievement was yet to come. He decided to create something no philanthropist had tried before, a global constitution for education, a document that would establish universal principles to ensure that every child on the planet had access to quality education, regardless of its geographical, socio-economic, or cultural origin. The project would involve world leaders, renowned educators, philosophers, scientists, and marginalized communities' representatives, creating global consensus on the fundamental right to education and the practical mechanisms to guarantee it. The process of creation of the Constitution took 5 years and involved consultations with more than 1,000 specialists from all continents. Kwame personally visited more than 100 countries, documenting educational systems, listening to stories of students and teachers, identifying structural and cultural barriers that prevented universal access to education. It was a Herculean work that required not only massive financial resources, but also sophisticated diplomacy to navigate political, religious, and cultural differences between nations. But Kwame was moved by a deep conviction that education was the only sustainable way to solve the great challenges of humanity: poverty, conflict, environmental degradation, inequality. The Global Constitution for Education was finally presented at a special United Nations Assembly, with the presence of heads of state, ministers of education, and representatives of civil society from all member countries. The document established not only philosophical principles on the right to education, but also specific goals, financing mechanisms, and monitoring systems that would make the practical implementation of the proposed ideals possible. It was a detailed blueprint to eliminate global illiteracy in a generation and ensure that no human talent was wasted for lack of educational opportunities. The approval of the Constitution unanimously was a historical moment that marked the beginning of a new era in global education. Countries have pledged to allocate specific percentages of their GDPs for education. Multinational corporations accepted expanded social responsibilities, and a new international cooperation architecture was established to ensure the effective implementation of the commitments made. Kwame had achieved something that many considered impossible: to create a global consensus on the fundamental importance of education and mobilize resources on a planetary scale to make this consensus a practical reality. During the Constitution's signature ceremony, Kwame made a point that Amara was present as a guest of honor. At 85, she first traveled out of Africa, accompanied by a medical team that secured her comfort during the long journey. Seeing his former teacher sitting in the front row of the UN General Assembly, surrounded by world leaders who treated her with reverence and respect, was one of the most exciting moments of Kwame's life. It was the complete materialization of the cycle that had begun in a small rural school. The woman who had planted the first education seed in her life was now witnessing the creation of a global system that would ensure that millions of other children had the same opportunities he had received. At 55, Kwame had achieved everything a human being could reasonably aspire in terms of success, recognition, and social impact. Their companies continued to thrive under new leadership. Their philanthropic initiatives had benefited hundreds of millions of people, and the global constitution for education was being implemented with impressive results around the world. But what most proud was not his individual achievements, but the global movement of social transformation that had helped catalyze. A new generation of leaders was emerging, inspired by their example, creating innovative solutions to complex problems and prioritizing social impact along with financial success. During this period, Kwame also dedicated himself to a deeply personal project, the creation of a living memorial for Amara in the village where everything had begun. It was not just a physical monument, but a state of the Art Educational Center that combined advanced technology with traditional African wisdom. The center offered free education from early childhood to university programs, serving not only the local village, but rural communities from all over the region. It was a way of ensuring that Amara's legacy continued to impact lives long after her own life, perpetuating the transformation cycle she had begun with a simple gesture of kindness. The inauguration of the Amara Educational Center was an event that brought together dignitaries from around the world. But the most touching moment was when Amara herself, now 87, cut off the inaugural tape accompanied by Kwame. She was physically fragile, but her spirit remained vibrant and her mind was still lucid. During her speech, she talked about how a small gesture of love can grow beyond any expectation, how each teacher has the power to change the world through her students, and how true wealth is measured by the ability to raise others. His words were broadcast live to millions of people around the world, becoming one of the most inspiring discourses ever recorded on education and social transformation. In the months following the inauguration of the center, Amara's health began to decline gradually. Kwame came to visit her weekly, and her conversations became even more precious and deep. They talked about the meaning of life, the legacy they would leave for future generations, about mutual gratitude for having shared such an extraordinary journey. Amara constantly expressed her admiration for the man Kwame had become, while he reaffirmed that all he had achieved was a direct result of love and faith that she had invested in him when she was just an orphaned and hungry boy. When Amara died peacefully at 88, the whole world stopped to honor the woman who had changed the course of history through a simple act of kindness. World leaders sent condolences, universities created scholarships in their memory, and millions of people shared stories about how her story had inspired their own lives. But for Kwame, no public tribute could properly capture the impact she had had on her life, and, by extension, on the world. He knew he would forever carry the sacred responsibility to continue honoring his legacy through his actions and choices, ensuring that the unconditional love she had planted in her heart to continue multiplying through future generations. The true greatness of this story does not reside in the billions that Kwame has accumulated, or in the international awards it has received, but in the profound understanding that we are all connected by invisible wires of love and possibility that transcend time, geography, and circumstances. When we look back, for that rainy afternoon when a rural teacher decided to feed an orphan boy, we realize that we were witnessing not only a gesture of compassion, but the exact moment when the universe planted a seed that would grow to turn millions of lives around the planet. Amara was not simply offering corn porridge. She was investing in the fundamental belief that every human being carries within her an infinite potential that only needs love and opportunity to flourish. The legacy that Kwame and Amara built together goes far beyond the institutions they created or the lives that played directly. They proved that the true revolution does not happen through violence or imposition, but through education, unconditional love, and unshakable belief in human potential. Each child who today has access to quality education through the initiatives they inspired carries with them a spark of the same flame that illuminated that small red clay school decades ago. It is a legacy that multiplies exponentially, creating waves of transformation that will continue to spread, much after the names of their creators are forgotten by the official history. The deepest lesson of this extraordinary journey resonates as an echo in our souls. We never know the real reach of our gestures of kindness. We can never completely predict the consequences of our simplest and most apparently insignificant choices. Amara didn't wake up that rainy morning thinking she was about to change the course of world history. She simply saw a child hungry and decided to feed her because it was the right thing to do. And perhaps that is exactly what the world needs each of us. Not large gestures calculated to impress or generate recognition, but small acts of genuine love that can, without realizing, planting seeds of transformation that will grow beyond our wilder imagination. What this story really teaches us is that true abundance is not found in banking coffers or investment portfolios, but in the ability to transform our own pain into purpose, our lack of generosity, our unconditional abandonment that extends to others. Kami has become a billionaire not despite its humble and painful origin, but because of it. Because it has learned from an early age that the value of a life is measured by the ability to raise other lives, to be a bridge for others to cross their own impossibility. And he had, even without ever having significant material riches, lived and died as one of the richest people in the world, because he had invested his whole life in the only heritage that really matters and never loses value, the human heart and its infinite potential for growth and transformation. If this story has aroused something deep in you, if you have lit the understanding that you can also be an instrument of transformation in one's life, if you realize that you may already have everything you need to plant your own seeds of greatness, so she has fulfilled her most sacred and revolutionary purpose. Leave your like if you believe in the transformative power of little gestures made with genuine love. Share if you know someone who needs to be remembered that it carries within you the potential to create miracles. And subscribe to the channel to continue discovering stories that reveal hidden magic in everyday life and the extraordinary power that resides in seemingly common hearts. Because in the end, we are all simultaneously Kwame and Lovett of this story. Sometimes we need someone who believes in ourselves when we do not believe ourselves. Sometimes we are called to be someone in the life of someone else who crosses our path carrying injured but not dead dreams. The question that echoes in our hearts is simple, but has the power to change everything. What role you will choose to play today, and what seed of love are you willing to plant even without knowing where it will grow?